Hello, welcome to episode 28 of CRT Sound System. I'm here with Reese as always. Reese, how are you?
I'm doing great. I'm fully ready to learn. My mind is open.
Yeah, that first track will definitely open your brain a bit. And we've got a guest this week to talk about the game of the week, which is 13 Sentinels. Nate, how are you?
I fucking love big robots.
One of my many Gundam expert friends. Despite I've never seen any Gundam until like 2 weeks ago.
That's good. That's good. You got a whole like half a century worth of media to catch up on.
Yeah, it's definitely daunting. But we're going to talk about some different giant robots this week. So I suppose, Nate, if you want to talk about the game a bit and sort of just the generalities of it.
Yeah, so 13 Sentinels is a really, really good game made by Vanillaware, same like studio that made Odin Sphere and Muramasa the Demon Blade. And it's like part visual novel and then the other part like RTS. And it's crazy. It's fantastic. It came out in the PS4 and it's on the Switch and it's available nowhere else, which is tragic because it's a game that more people need to play for sure.
It is having bowled through the tutorial, which took me like 3 to 4 hours. It is what I played was wonderful, but it seems like there's some really amusing barriers to entry. That you just need the specific console, or I agree with you. I cannot imagine this running on the Switch. Also, I cannot imagine anything running on the Switch. So that's a bias. But something I'm curious about, the way it seems like is all of the RTS one part and all of the visual novel a separate part. Was that my understanding of the structure of the story? Once you get through the tutorial.
How do you mean, as in like they're completely separate entities, like, or?
Well, I just saw that there was like a destruction mode and then there was a story mode. And I was curious if that means like the destruction mode is just like separate battle stuff, or do you also do battles in the story mode?
So the way the game actually structures its progression is really weird. You have access to both like the remembrance, which is the story mode, and then the destruction, which is the battles. You have access to both of them, but if you progress too far in one of them, it locks you out until you get a certain amount of progress in the other mode.
Okay,
Interesting.
That makes sense. You can't just do all of the story without any of the robot fighting, but it was initially very confusing. It was just like, well, I guess I would like all my new favorite Japanese high school best friends to overcome. So I'll play the story mode and I'll return to destruction later.
Yeah.
But it's really, really, I think once you get into it just a little bit, like there's a lot of really high highs, even in the tutorial. Before we started recording, I mentioned there's like very early on, there's a moment where a sentinel shows up kind of very surprisingly and fills up the whole screen, and it's like something that when you're in the visual novel sort of pacing of things, like I wasn't expecting it, and I thought it was really exciting. And it seems like it's fine tuning a lot of stuff along those sort of like heightened dramatic lines. And I think having listening to this opening track and the music I did listen to, it feels like the music really reciprocates that it's very idiosyncratic in a very like confident way, and it's very exciting.
Yeah, I think a big thing I noticed with the soundtrack specifically, and I wonder if that's part of the whole, the fact that the game splits its sort of major elements, is that like there's definitely like two sides of this soundtrack. One is the really electronic stuff, and one is the sort of acousticy kind of stuff with like more classical instruments, and I think that's a really cool sort of way to get that idea across in the music as well as in the gameplay. But I didn't actually realize that it was fully split like that. I assumed it was just you did a battle, you had some cutscenes, you did more battles, like a sort of fairly standard strategy RPG. That sort of concept is actually quite interesting to me. It makes me more interested in playing it actually.
Oh, I think you'd really enjoy it, and it's even like crazier than you think, because like the kind of the way the visual novel is set is that you have you have the events of the story, but you're experiencing it through the eyes of 11 different characters. You can choose what like characters' stories you do at a time. Like you can pick to do
Okay.
one character's chapter, and then you can pick to do another character's chapter, and again, like the split between the visual novel and the battle, sometimes progressing too far in one story will lock you out of continuing it until you've gone to other stories. So it's you're
Okay.
seeing the same story just from different angles in the visual novel stuff, and then you also have the battle stuff as well. So the game does this really good job of like getting its hooks into you early, where it starts drip feeding you stuff, and then you need to do other characters' stories to get to what you wanted to originally like see the conclusion of in another character's. And then you also have to do the battles, and then you get into the battles and you realize, wait, actually, this is really addicting. But then you can't do any more battles because you need to do the story.
That's yeah, it's a good way, I suppose, to sort of keep you in it, and like I think that's definitely it's going to mess with the pacing a bit, and like I think that's cool. It's sort of like a Sonic Adventure 1 type deal.
Yeah.
Where
I
you're sort of
There's no two people that I've spoken to about this game who have experienced it in the same way. Like
yeah.
everyone I've spoken to like has done different things first and found out like different pieces of information to the big puzzle, and like it's
Mhm.
changed their experience. It's great.
That's cool.
Yeah, I like too is that it's very modular like that. It doesn't you may have to go through specific things to unlock stuff, but it seems like, it just has the full story tree, and it doesn't reveal what you haven't seen yet, but you can go back to any part of the game at any time, and it seems to be encouraging that. So it's very kind of like modular in that sense, that you're very much choosing your own adventure. And from what little I played of it, to me, maybe I'll change my mind going on, but I was very pleased with the change up of the pacing after the tutorial, where it was just kind of like bopping around to what I felt like.
Yeah.
I think it immensely. I think even if you don't like this game, you have to admit it is it is innovative. It's doing things more games should do, or thinking about things in a way more games should.
Yeah. No, I'm someone who enjoys visual novels, but not so much the RTS stuff. If more RTS games enticed me the way that this does to play RTS stuff with its story stuff, I'd play more RTS games. But on the other side, if more games in general just did their story stuff, a bit more open ended and allowed players to like choose their own kind of path in a way that like actually feels like you're choosing your own path, I'd play more story-focused games too. This game does so many things that other games just don't seem to be doing in a lot of places, and I understand why. It's because making a game with that kind of structure is hard. But like
Yeah.
this game, like Vanillaware, isn't exactly a massive like dev team either. So like they've done a really good job with this game. It's crazy because like I mentioned before, these are the same people that made Muramasa the Demon Blade for the Nintendo Wii that I played as a teenager. That game's fun, but like this is an entirely like different scope. It's crazy.
And they really do feed into each other, I think, really well. They're very, very separate sort of playing experiences, but it is a 4-hour tutorial, or maybe slightly shorter. I just took a while. But like when Yuki Takamiya is fucking yelling at people because she wants to find Natcha, and I'm like, that's right. I'm emotionally invested in all of this screaming in a way I would not be had I not spent time, looking for a delicious sandwich or whatever in the visual novel part. So I think that it's, it makes sense, I think, to any half decent story enjoyer that you need to have stuff rooted in the characters. But they do a really good job of doing that for both ends of the game spectrum.
Yeah. That's another thing as well on the whole visual novel side as well, is the entire game is like completely voice acted, and it's really good like performance work all around.
Absolutely agree.
Cool. I think we'll jump into some music. So I suppose with how the game is split up, I think all of the tracks that I have here, as far as I can tell, are from Battle ones, so they all seem to be sort of named after like biological or scientific stuff. There's all the battle tracks, and then the non-battle tracks seem to have more sort of normal names.
Yeah.
Is what I sort of figured out from listening through it, because there's definitely a different vibe to the tracks that are in the next block and these ones. So the first one I have is VALINE, and then ISOLEUCINE, I guess is what that is. I'm going to mess up a lot of these pronunciations. Both of those are by Yoshimi Kudo. Then we have PHENYLALANINE, which is by Mitsuhiro Kaneda, and METHIONINE, which is by Yukinori Kikuchi. So we'll jump into the 4 of those, and then we'll talk a bit more about the game after. Reese, you've been silent the entire time we were listening to those tunes, so I think you should go first and talk about it.
I'm just I am just jamming here. I listened. I tried to listen to this soundtrack. I did more prep for this than I did for most of the episodes, and like I feel like I did not scratch the surface at all. So I feel like I'm listening to each of these for the first time. Just fucking gargantuan. Gargantuan soundtrack just in the number of tracks. I offhand, knowing I would never be able to afford such a thing, but I wanted to check if the album had ever been released on vinyl. And like the first, all of the things are Reddit posts where people are going like, they will never release this thing on vinyl. There's too much music. What's wrong with you? So yeah, I don't know. It that not just in the size, but in the tracks themselves. It feels like every element of the song, the percussion, the insane strings are in every one of these battle tracks. I feel like is going as hard as it can, but there is a like I mentioned before, there's a synergy to it that I think they all play really well off of each other. And I don't know. I just want to like in the middle of the podcast recording, I just want to do drugs and fucking twist my ankle, bopping around here in my room. So I don't know. That's what I've been up to.
Yeah, I think it's worth talking a bit about sort of the musicians behind this as well, because like I have mentioned we did a very recent episode on Hitoshi Sakimoto, and I probably mentioned on that episode just his sort of record company slash music ensemble Bass Escape, which sort of where he gets all his musicians from that do the soundtracks, and like a lot of them have been with him for years. And it's a lot of actually. I didn't realize how many of the Vanillaware games were soundtracked by people who worked for Bass Escape, going back as far as Odin Sphere, which is cool because it sort of gives there a bit of a continuity between those games as well.
Yeah, no, like you take a look at like you mentioned, like the older Vanillaware stuff, and like it's all the same people working on these games, which is
Yeah,
crazy because you look at everything they've done, and like outside of making Odin Sphere, like the series, everything else they've done has been like radically different, and the soundtracks in all of them are radically different.
yeah,
And you have the same people coming back to work on these things. It's crazy. I knew that Bass Escape did the soundtrack for this, but when I went looking for individual like composers and whatnot, I couldn't find them. So when you linked the playlist there last week, and I saw all these names, it's the first time seeing that these different people worked on these tracks. It's like I recognize some of these names, and it's like that's crazy. I
yeah.
didn't know they worked on this game. That's insane.
Yeah, and I think sort of the main creative sort of force for the music is Hitoshi Sakimoto, and you can definitely hear it even in the tracks that he hasn't done, because he does have that very distinct style. And I suppose the other thing to really note with Bass Escape is that they've done a ton of cave shooters, which is definitely a whole future episode for me, because I'm shit at shooters, but I love cave games, and in particular I love the soundtracks for them. So that's definitely something I'm going to be. That's a well I'm going to be going back to.
It's crazy to me how I look at at a soundtrack like this. I mean I know better now, being a host of this podcast, but my instinct is to assume that like there's going to be some filler, there's going to be some tracks that are lesser, and there's certainly tracks that I think immediately grip me emotionally more so than others. But like I am just staggered by the consistency in the music, not just in the soundtrack, which is from these composers, where you can just trust. You can just trust that there's gonna be you hear a particular song from somebody, it's gonna be a banger. Like you just know. You're never just like, yeah, this one's soundtrack. They were phoning it in. That seems to happen a lot less.
Yeah.
And it's funny you mentioned that about not knowing what composer did what song, because that is the absolute number one like issue on the pod for us is
Yeah.
trying to do Street Fighter 2 music or something, and it's just like all the composers are just named like Spoon because they didn't
No,
want them
like
poaching each other.
it's
And
definitely a hell of a
so
lot better now, but like back then, it's early Capcom. Oh, jeez,
mm,
no, you like those names are lost to time.
Yeah. No, it's,
absolutely. So Tom is regularly leveling up his ability to just
well,
to
to be
track
fair,
that stuff down.
these are all sort of on the track listing that I downloaded. So I don't want to take any particular credit for
No,
finding these.
just take the credit. You should say you called each individual composer in Japan and got the info.
Imagine if I ever did that much work for this podcast. But yeah, one thing I suppose I wanted to mention as well is I really like how they include and we talked about it in the break as well, but I really like how they include the sort of ending, the battle end theme, sort of as a little bit of a coda to each of the tracks, and it sort of comes in jarringly, which is cool because it's sort of how you would have heard, how you'd hear it in the game. And I like that sort of each battle theme has a corresponding sort of ending theme that sort of reprises some of the themes in a maybe more chilled out fashion, because those tracks all really just go. They do not stop.
Yeah, like again, like these are tracks that are meant to be played for like these RTS segments that could take like 10, 20 minutes. Like they're not meant to have an end point, because what happens if someone is just trash at the game?
Yeah,
Like so they kind of I do wish, like I mentioned before when we were talking about, I do wish that they did separate the ending themes, but at the same time, that would mean adding so much more time to the overall soundtrack. And like when they did a CD release of this, it was like 4 discs. If they put the
yeah,
victory themes on, like that's another disc.
yeah. That's yeah. Um, and I really got to call out the strings again. Just like every track in those is just such good strings,
Yeah,
and they're used in just the right moments, and you can really feel sort of where they're sort of putting these bits in to sort of to show you the turns of battle and sort of get you pumped up to sort of start taking people on. It's a really cool effect.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's really good.
at
Oh, go on.
least where I am in the story, which is pretty early on. There are certainly the demos are certainly threats, but you also have uh, a lot of power at your disposal to apply what you want, and you have those kind of like those big meta attacks and stuff. So
Hmm.
I like that there is sort of like maybe lightness isn't the right word, but there's an exhilarating hope to these little moments. Like you're
Mm,
that I think it's not like the strings are gonna always line up, but all of these different kind of emotional elements are in there, and it I think it matches up uh, with the battle really well when you're actually into it, even if it's not scored to what you're doing.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's one thing I love to see in or hear in soundtracks is when you have very clearly like, oh yeah, this is the beginning, this is when the player, like this is going to play when the player gets into the level or the fight or whatever, and then this part is for when shit gets fucked. Like that's what this part is for, and this soundtrack is very much structured like that. And it's the combat gets so hectic at times that like if you didn't have something like that behind it, like it wouldn't work. Like no, it's no
Absolutely.
matter how many times I listen to this soundtrack and no matter how many times I revisit the game, I'm always just in awe of how well like the soundtrack fits with what's happening at all times.
does it do dynamic music at all? Do you
The
know or?
battle themes are dynamic, yeah.
Oh, okay,
Okay.
cool. That's pretty cool.
Um, a I like to in the story of the game, you're getting like dramatically warped to different points in time, etc. And sort of like the way that you're dropped into the story, the battle parts of the story, at least in the tutorial, it's kind of like a little bit shocking and bracing. And I just love that the music it both like helps set the stage, but also it's a really great like, oh fucking this is fucking on now. I'm worried about these kaiju. It's great.
And actually, let me ask a bit about the plot of the game, because like you talked about the sort of the way it's split between story and battle, but like what is the story? All I know about it is there's some waifus.
I wouldn't say waifus, but like no, it's a hard game to talk about because of the way the plot is structured. But like
Okay.
the most bare bones plot is basically it's there's kaiju attacks in 1980s Japan, and there's a group of 11 teenagers who have access to these giant mechs, the Sentinels, and they're the only way to stop these kaiju attacks.
Okay,
But of
fairly
course,
standard
the more
setup.
you,
So
yeah, but the more you play, like Reese mentioned, there's like different periods in time and whatnot.
yeah,
There's characters who are from the past who have time traveled forward, and there's characters from the future who have time traveled back, and that's where these mechs have come from. Obviously, is from the future.
okay.
But it's one of those games where you are picking up pieces of a puzzle for the plot. It makes no fucking sense until everything makes sense. It's
Okay.
And
Yeah.
each character has their own like very specific narrative.
yeah.
The super introverted girl who falls in love, has to go on a quest to save her husband Fu, and it's stuff like that. And so even though they're weaving together and there's this complicated, it seems like it's going to get more insanely complicated, like different high school teenagers from different times are like traveling to 60 years back in time to attend the same high school, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of very centered around that, and there's a lot of kind of weird shell game stuff with that. And then it's kind of like it's I'm not entirely clear at what point the battle stuff happens in the story. It seems to be kind of removed from the story narrative, at least in the tutorial. Like it's at some point at a different time from what you're playing, these fights were going on that then go on to impact the very broad overarching story of the visual novel. But that's just with I feel only comfortable talking about it because I'm literally talking about the tutorial. It seems like there's a ton more to be revealed. And they had it's like very kind of small slice of life stuff until it isn't, and the like big crazy shit's happening.
The slice of life stuff
the idea.
is great. It's so funny because like there's certain scenes that'll happen, and like because you have these different characters and you're seeing them from different perspectives. Like there's one early game moment that like, or I say early game on my like first playthrough, I just kind of focused one character, and there's one scene where like there's like three characters hanging out, and they're just talking about different things. And then later on in the game, like way later, like 10 hours later, playing another character's story, I saw the exact same thing because it was the same scene from a different perspective. But while the other characters were yapping away, the character I was playing as couldn't keep his thoughts together because like he was worried about shit from like 2 chapters ago. So it's like it's so funny seeing just seeing these characters like, and the story, the way they interact with the story from different perspectives is great.
Yeah, and even if the meta doesn't make sense, I would say the dialed in personal narrative of the characters that I've seen makes sense. I started on the Iori plot, Iori, however you pronounce it. And it's and it's in many ways I have no idea what the fuck is going on. But I do know I need to figure out how to feed this damn cat so we to progress. And you're just talking to your friends about your friends are talking about cute boys and stuff, and you're just like, let's not stop talking about that so we can feed this cat. It's like trying to figure that out is really
Yeah.
funny. So yeah, I think it's the sort of stuff that I think only works because the writing is really great and there's effort into the performances, on top of all of the other sort of excellent music as well. Are we moving on to visual novel music for the next block?
Yeah, I think these are sort of mostly from the visual novel stuff. Good segue, Reese.
Thank you.
So we have the first track here is "Bright Days Ahead," which is by Azusa Chiba. Then we have "In the Doldrums," 40 Winks, and "A Clause with Cause," all of which are by Rikako Watanabe. Yeah, those all those visual novelty tracks are such a different vibe, but yet it still sort of feels really sort of connected to the battle stuff. It's very cool how they managed to do that.
It's the same game. How is it the same game? it's, it's completely different. How is it the same game?
Yeah. And as I mentioned, that is something I do love about video game music. Is just how you can get soundtracks that go from like banging speed garage type tempos to just really chilled out tracks with like lovely tuned percussion and nice strings and everything. It's cool. Um, I do want, because you did mention at the start and we talked about it a bit during the break there. I do want to sort of talk about the mix, because they haven't really been discussed as of yet in the podcast. So like what's the deal with the mix? Like, because it's so weird, because you look at like screenshots and it's a lot of the stuff you see is just mostly for the visual novel stuff, at least sort of in the marketing. So I don't actually know what these mechs look like.
Yeah.
I tried to look for some concept art and they look cool, but like I don't know how they work in the game and things like that. So as a mech enjoyer, I would like you to talk about them for a little bit.
All right. Well, I just want to preface this by you asked me to talk about mechs. You did this to yourself. You understand this. So
We've
the
got
mechs in this game, the mechs in this game are like they're weird because they actually show up more in the visual novel. They actually physically show up more in the visual novel stuff than they do in the battle stuff.
Okay.
Because in the battle stuff, on the like the UI for the battle stuff is everything is just like pixely blocks, right? So you have the enemies are these red masses of pixely blocks. Then for your units, you have these like humanoid-ish shaped pixely blocks. That's what you see in the battles. But then in
Okay.
the visual novel, they actually do show up, and they look like military weapons. That's the only real way to put it.
Okay.
Yeah, they look like something out of Armored Core. They're insanely cool.
That's cool.
You
Yeah,
spend
it
so much
goes
time. Oh, go on.
just that it goes for both the mechs and the kaiju. You know, the big tripod with four legs, as they call it, is just a pixely block, and you don't mind because there's so much going on in that part, in the battle part of the game. But in the visual novel part, when you're introduced to them,
They're terrifying.
in that sense, yeah, I mean, you're on like a destroyed rise overlooking like a city of rubble, and then just like one of the four-legged tripods raises its head like right next to you, and it's fucking terrifying. It's and it's like super detailed and presented. So it is almost it's interesting how it is a feature of the visual novel, because in the RTS parts of it, you kind of like have all of these the different portraits of their character, and you're still getting kind of like the back and forth of the characters in there, and so that's the most detailed representation. And they do have like pictures to sort of like delineate that you can like zoom in on and check out. But it's kind of like a part of the dossier more than anything. Sorry to interrupt.
No. But with the mechs and this stuff, like there's so much complexity because you spend so much time in what is basically like this game's like garage. Like I mentioned Armored Core before. Like you spend so much time in what is basically the garage. It's insane, and you're tuning your stats, you're like upgrading like mods and stuff for these mechs. It's something. It's not for everyone, but it's for me. They did that just for me.
Yeah, that was one thing you said sort of when we were planning this. You were like, you have to include the garage theme,
yeah.
because you do end up listening to that a lot.
You probably hear that more than any other like track in the entire game.
Yeah. I do like a game that sort of allows you to just sit in a menu for 3 hours and not play any other aspect of the game except for just like tweaking one or two statistics to get it just the right way you want it.
Well, that's a good thing you mentioned, because we mentioned at the start like there's how the game splits itself between visual novel and like the battle mode, and they call that like remembrance and they call that destruction. There's a third option that I didn't mention,
Okay.
which is they called analysis, which is just all of the menus and the lore.
Oh
That's
yeah,
cool.
there is what an impenetrable in-game wiki that I
Yeah,
have to
it's
not look at to be able to for my ADHD to remain under control in the game.
the most cruel thing about that is that they actually lock like you out of everything. And the more you play the game, you get like points to unlock articles. So
Yeah, and it's real funny where it's just like, I have one one bit of mystery file currency. I guess I'll spend it on the hot nurse, and then it's just like the nurse this woman is the nurse at this school. She knows these two characters. You're like, okay, it all lends to the immensity of this game. Like I don't I think it. I think if I heard this before playing it, I would kind of balk, but it is like one of the biggest feeling games I've ever played. And the fact that there's these separate tracks you can go down, because it does seem like just pouring through the wiki is its own separate third of the game.
yeah,
um,
yeah.
so I love that.
It's nice of them to segment it off like that, though. At least.
It's nice of them to do that, but it's also very intimidating when you're playing the game for the first time.
Yeah, I bet.
But no, it's mostly just like a bunch of menus and a wiki, and then they make it seem like it's a secret like third part of the game.
I'm glad you chose Bright Days Ahead, because having started the Iori storyline, speaking of just sitting and listening to the same track, it feels like that is something that the game is very comfortable with you doing. Is just the first little puzzle you have to do is figure out how to feed the cat. So you're just at this extremely idyllic crosswalk while everybody's kind of figuring out what they want to do next in their hang, while you're just looking at I want to feed the kitty. It's my life now. I cannot progress in my life until I feed the kitty, just like real life. And I can understand if you listen to some of these tracks so much across the different parts of the game, it would it might start to you would want some change up, but it just feels like the most like stereotypically idyllic summer day hanging out with your friends. And by stereotypical, it's like the music isn't stereotypical, but it is the platonic ideal is the better word of these things. And it's very, it is certainly with the slice of life anime flavor. Certainly, I think Iori's first scene is she's running to school with toast in her mouth. So it's not afraid to go there, but it's wonderful.
And then she bumps into a boy, and she spends the rest of the game wondering who he is. Like,
yep.
It's not. It wears its heart on its sleeve. It knows what it is. It knows what it's doing, and it's not afraid to be that. And then also they throw a big robot at you.
I'll always appreciate something that just like is going. Yeah, I am part of this genre. Sorry, just deal with this. Let's jump into some more music. So we talked about the garage theme, so that's going to be the first track from for the next block, which is Voyage to Tomorrow by Hitoshi Sakimoto. Then we have Hack and Crash, which is by Mitsuhiro Kaneda, and To the Final Battle, which is by Yoshimi Kudo. I'm definitely ready for the final battle after that. Um, yeah, I definitely wanted to sort of contrast that Voyage to Tomorrow track with the other two, just because the other visual novel stuff throughout the whole game is very sort of quite chill, and sort of there's a lot going on in them, but they're not sort of you don't get that sense of tension or that sense of momentum. But like the hack and crash, which you were saying to me sort of comes up a lot in the game.
Yeah.
That one really jumped out to me when I was first listening through it as like, oh, this is really exceptional. It's such a cool piece of music, and like it definitely puts you on edge, even if you don't really know why.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
absolutely. And I think the tension is also flowing quite liberally from the narrative as well. Like
Mm.
this certain tracks hit and you're already primed because something fucked up's happening on screen most likely.
Yeah, it's always good, I think, when a game can sort of establish those sort of themes. That when you hear them, you're like, oh fuck.
Yeah.
That you have that moment of knowing, oh no, something bad is going to happen. So I want to ask actually, and I don't know if you know this, but did George Kamitami do the art for this game? Because like compared to other Vanillaware games, the art in this is very sort of restrained.
I don't know if he did, but I'd imagine he probably did, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, just like compared to the stuff in other games, particularly Dragon's Crown, which I think is sort of famously insanely horny. Like, not to say that there's not an element of horniness to the designs and the art that I've seen for this game, but like it's definitely more sort of in line with your standard anime stuff rather than like the sort of almost grotesque nature of how Kamitami draws stuff in the past. Which is not to say, which is not a judgment on it. It's just it is a sort of a grotesque the way the features are in some of those.
I would say this game is still it has a time and its place, but it is extremely fucking shameless about being horny. So
Yeah,
I would not be surprised, especially like you got the busty nurse character.
that was the one that
That gets
immediately.
a lot of that gets progressively more heavily featured. And I would say that maybe it's a little bit more buried in the game. So I don't know. I don't know if it's the same artist, but I wouldn't be surprised. It's certainly what could top Dragon Crown? Nothing, but
Yeah,
I wouldn't be surprised.
I just took a quick look there, and it doesn't look like George Kamitani was on like art design for this one. He was writing only.
Okay, fair enough.
He probably did some stuff like background stuff because like it looks like a Vanillaware game, but like it's not.
It does, yeah.
Like you mentioned, it's not at that level, yeah.
Yeah. It's definitely sort of it's in the sort of the standard anime wheelhouse, but I think what makes it really stand out is the coloring, and that sort of gives it that Vanillaware look more than anything else, because like the art that they use often has really interesting coloring, and it's not just like a lot of primary colors and flat shading. Like there's really cool artwork or sort of art design in their games, even outside of the actual drawings themselves.
I still don't understand how Vanillaware games manage to like capture lighting that well.
It's insane.
Like it looks
and there's
like
a lot of little moments with the art too that I found were really compelling. I don't remember the character's name, the like goofy best friend guy who has the message, who gets the message from the TV. There's a moment where he gives Yuki a ride, and there's this brief moment of them just like on the motorcycle, like driving down the highway. And it's not like, frame by frame every car. Like it's clear they're doing video game shortcuts for stuff, but with the lighting and everything just tuned in just specifically, it was kind of like a breathtaking moment of movement. Like, you feel a little bit like you are having an exciting little ride on the back of a motorcycle. I think that there's a lot of really smart touches that I don't know how to fully articulate, but it's really wild, really good.
Yeah, it's good stuff. And it's definitely sort of the most striking thing that sort of jumps out to me when I look at screenshots of the game, and it's
It's a
something that
visual last
I'm looking
visual
for.
novel.
Yeah. I am genuinely looking forward to finally getting around to actually playing this game, and doing this
Yes.
episode has definitely made me sort of more inclined to do it sooner rather than later, I think.
I know you'll like it.
Yeah. Oh, I know it's one of those games I saw and I was like, oh, this is definitely in my wheelhouse. But like, it came out like literally as my kid was born, so I
Yeah,
was just like,
yeah.
It came out like a month after Elliot was born, so I was just like, I do not have time to play any game that's like this steep.
Yeah, sometimes it's just a pleasure to find the excuse on this podcast. It's there are so many different options in the realm of gaming. Sitting down and playing 13 Sentinels until I get it, man. Is not always the easiest choice to make. With just being like, well, fuck, I'm just gonna see what's up with this game, and then, several hours later, I'm just fucking fully invested. And the kind of last tactical battle where they give you all the characters and present, like, not a real challenge, but you got to use everybody's abilities, stuff like that. It comes together real nicely, and it's just like very easy to appreciate the level of craft in this game. It's I think it's really hard to put together a game, and I could eat my words later with stuff because I've only played the first 4 to 5 hours, but that it fits together really well. And there's a lot of video game shortcuts stuff that I'm sure people could level as being less than elegant, but I think it's put together in a way that I think is masterful. At least it seems that way.
Yeah. No, like I said before, like the game knows what it is, and it's perfectly fine being just that. So like when there's more intense things happening in the visual novel segment, it's very much like it's very limited in some aspects with like 2D animation and whatnot when they're trying to make something look like it's happening in a 3D space, and obviously that doesn't happen. But at the same time, it's fine. It works as what it is. It doesn't need to like do other stuff. Like that. It does what it does well.
and at first, stuff like the remembrance and destruction, and then within remembrance, there's a lot of different like story options, like directions that you can go with just the choice of characters and the sort of like they're going back and revisiting chapters, stuff like that. It does the game the service of breaking things up enough so it's just like enough of a reset button, so like you've had your little slice of life story that's delivered these important narrative beats, and then you go on to this other character story, and sort of like you're walking along a path or whatever, and it's beautiful out, and you're just like, am I gonna meet up with my girlfriend or fucking like drones going to attack me? It's really good at those kind of tone switches that you hear that you've heard throughout the soundtrack. There's such a wide spectrum. That
have you had a nice time hanging out with your friends? Citizens are evacuating. Defend the hospital.
Exactly. And so it's fantastic.
That's good. Yeah, definitely looking forward to getting into it. But I think we'll jump into the last block of tracks anyway, which is a few more battle themes. So I have TRYPTOPHAN, which is by Rikako Watanabe. I have Histidine by Yukinori Kikuchi, and I have DEOXYRIBOSE, which is by Yoshimi Kudo. Yoshimi Kudo really didn't have to go that hard for that last one. But I'm glad that he did, because Jesus Christ.
Yeah, seriously.
No matter how many times I hear that track, I'm never prepared for the recovery afterwards.
It's that's crazy. I can only call this game gargantuan and broad and absolutely fucking banging so many times. But I just did it one last time.
Yeah, definitely deserves it. Like there's so many different parts and in that track, and it's true of the whole soundtrack, but this track in particular really feels like it's just sort of taking every idea in the game and just turning the knob up to 11 on it.
Yeah.
And it's such a cool thing. Like the really cool chorus, the guitar sounds incredible. I love the way the drums sound. It's just such a fucking cool track.
It's reflected in the gameplay as well, because like I've mentioned it before, but like when we were talking before during like the music, but this is one of the few games I have seen. Like I've talked about how simplistic the battle UI looks. This game
Yeah.
pushes the PS4. Like it lags on PS4. It's an RTS, really basic looking RTS, and you have that track playing in the background while your PS4 is struggling. It's an experience.
Yeah, I mean, I can only imagine how much crazier it's gonna get. Even in that final tutorial match, and they're just throwing like, it's like there's 100 dudes on screen, and you have all of your favorite pals there together, and there's so many like little indicators, and you have to keep track of the long range missiles, and everything has kind of like a real-time turn-based vibe to it too, and so it's not totally totally static at first. It's really crazy trying to get through it, and I'm just trying to imagine what you're doing in my mind's eye while that track is playing.
Panicking.
Like I have to imagine there is just like colored smoke coming from the original PS4.
Yeah.
Half because of the demands of the system, and half because the song is just too much for it at the same time.
Yeah. No, if you have the lights turned off in the room while you're playing, like the PS4 will start levitating. It's crazy.
Oh God. Yeah, because it is interesting to see like screenshots of the battle stuff, and it does look quite basic, and yeah, when you mentioned that it was making your PS4 take off, I was just like, that's it's just, and it is just like a lot of particle effects and just a bunch of shit flying around the screen at once, isn't it?
Yeah.
So.
No, it's like you're grateful that the UI is so simple, because you would not be able to tell what was happening otherwise. No, and like it gets crazy, it gets hectic, it gets really hard, and it keeps going. It just keeps going and keeps getting harder, because like at the start of that block you had Tryptophan and Histidine. I mentioned this to you like there while we were listening to that. Those tracks do not play in the main game. I have played those tracks for people who have beaten the game, and they look at me and they go, "Where does this play?" I say it doesn't. After you beat the game, you unlock post-game challenge battles, and like towards the end game of those, that's when you start hearing those tracks. Like, there's so much good music in this game.
I'm not surprised that there's post-game challenges, but that is something I hear and my heart sings. I think even the least, even a game that's not terribly overwhelming people that has that stuff can be really compelling, just because they're pushing the various mechanics that they spent all this time designing to their limits without having to worry. The one post game, this has nothing related to 13 Sentinels, but the one post game challenge track, challenge experience, I was so surprised to love, and I played it for longer than the main game, was like the time trial stuff in Rise of the Tomb Raider. And the only reason I mention it is because this is the only time in my life I'm going to get the opportunity to. But I'm excited to check it out for whenever I get through 13 Sentinels in 2025 or whatever.
Cool. Yeah, and I do want to say that both of those tracks were very, very cool. I really like the sort of, again, the tune percussion that shows up in them, and the those sort of arpeggiated synths is a really cool sound. And I don't want to sort of let our love of deoxyribose sort of overcome that, because those tracks are both extremely cool. But yeah, it's tough to be next to deoxyribose on a track listing, I think.
No, like the other two tracks they play in a nightclub when you're out with friends and you're having a fantastic time. Deoxyribose plays in an RPG when you're fighting God. Like that's it's just the way it is. You know, like it doesn't mean that they're lesser. It just means that they're not standing on the same stage. You know?
Yeah,
absolutely.
But yeah, it's been great fun having you, Nate. Really, really cool game to talk about. A really cool soundtrack. Definitely one of those ones that I've sort of wanted to do more or less since the start. So thanks for giving me the excuse.
Yeah. Thank you so much for bringing this to us. I personally am really excited to dig into it and to have the proper context to enjoy it, because really it's I have heard from billions of nerds online, but all that is articulated is play 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim, and I'm like, okay, I bought it on sale. This is a long tutorial, and so, but now I am part of the horde that just will say the sentence, play 13 Sentinels with nothing else. So thanks, and thank you for your time. It was a delight.
Thank you again for having me. I'm always very eager to spread the word of the gospel of Big Robot.
We'll definitely have you back for some more big robot action at some point in the future.
This is a soundtrack that I feel like at least is going to spawn another episode, probably two. Feels like.
I think I might come back to this well for some things, certainly.
Absolutely.
There's too much good music in this game to ignore it entirely from now on. But yeah, do you have anything you want to plug or anything like that, Nate, before we let you go?
No, don't perceive me. No, if you want, you can follow me on Twitter at Stiggly. That's STYGGLY.
Cool. And I will put a link to that in the show notes.
Cool. But yeah, no, thanks for having me.
It's nice as well to get more Irish people on the podcast, just in general.
The bona fides for irepod.com.
Yeah, they were breathing down my neck about having more Irish people on the podcast. Reese, what have you got for us?
You can check me out at Your Very Good Bud on Twitter or Blue Sky. I also have another much more mentally ill podcast called Video Games Are the Worst Thing on Earth. And you can check that out where we analyze sort of the politics and kind of culture of gaming from a leftist perspective.
It's a good podcast. Go listen to it.
Thank you. What about you, Tom? Where can we check you out?
Usual. Yeah. Still very much just on Blue Sky and Mastodon. So you can find me there as 4Push on either Mastodon or Blue Sky. You can find the podcast on Blue Sky now. And we're still on Twitter for the time being. CRT Pod System on Twitter, CRT Sound System on almost anything else. I think that was it. Actually, no. Yeah, I was going to talk more about the Twitch, but I don't actually use the Twitch very often. So,
I really hope that at some point during Twitter's collapse, that we can get the CRT Sound System name away from the foul villain who stole it from us like 10 years ago when he made his account. I feel like if Twitter is going to collapse so totally, that's the very least Elon Musk could do for us.
The very least. All right, so I suppose we'll close out tonight with the Edge of the Future. I apologize. Which is the final battle track, I think you said, Nate. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So any thoughts on this before we jump into it?
I think Brat Overflow is one of the strongest openings I've ever heard in a game, and I wasn't prepared for this track
Yeah.
to bring that leitmotif back.
Yeah, it's cool how it does that, definitely. Yeah, and also composed by Hitoshi Sakimoto. So I think it's appropriate that sort of he closes, opens and closes this episode. And if you enjoyed my my episode on Hitoshi Sakimoto as well, it's definitely always good to hear more of him. Thanks again, Nate. Thank you, Reese, and we will close out with Edge of the Future. And have a good one, everyone.
Goodbye.
Take care.